This is the Friday, May 24th, 2019 version of the Market Plus segment. Joining us again is Sue Martin. Sue, welcome back.
Thank you, Delaney.
So we've got some great social media questions here. We're going to save the tariff discussion, I think, for the end. So folks, if that's what you're here for, stay tuned. Let's take a question, though, off the top here from Craig in Adams, Minnesota. He said, which has a better outlook in the next month, corn or soybeans, and why?
Beans will start to come around. I'm probably going to stick with corn because corn is the one that we're looking at the possibility of being so late, where beans you can still go shorter varieties and get them in. Still would probably see some yield drag, but I'm going to go with corn. And the one thing we have to keep in mind is that in corn, not only is our domestic market so important, you know, they're very aware of what's going on here for weather. But China's also encountering a bad situation with armyworms. And they started noticing it in January, I believe, and it's been starting to move north. It was moving from southern China to northern China, or moving that direction. Armyworms can decimate a field in nothing flat. And I think I think China just needs everything. And their corn imports are up 75% for the month of April. And for the first 4 months of this year, I believe wheat imports were also up 75%. They're needing a little bit of everything, I think.
Sue, is that still the case even with African swine fever? We've got a good question here that sets up that idea that maybe China does need everything. We've got a question here from John in Kansas. He said, where do all these beans that are in storage go, especially since dead pigs don't eat?
Well, here's the thing. China, yes, dead pigs don't eat. But here's the thing. They're expanding their poultry, expanding aquaculture. And their crush by co-feed was up 15% so far this year. They're crushing beans. And by the way, China is taking beans from the U.S. People aren't paying attention. In March, and I might have mentioned this when I was on the show before, I can't remember, but in March, China took over 90%, if not 95% of the beans on deliveries.
Of the beans they pledged to purchase, or can you clarify that?
Of beans that they buy on the board through Chicago Board of Trade, and then they sit there and take the longs or the deliveries of them. They're doing the same thing here in May. For example, if there's 230 cars delivered of beans, they're taking 221. That's how aggressive they are. Now, these are beans that are going over to China, probably. They are not in the weekly export sales, so they don't show up. The only time they show up is if they're inspected to be loaded on a ship, and that's it. Now, yes, you worry about the tariff. They don't pay tariffs because they're a state-owned agency by the government. Therefore, they get paid back. Anything they pay out as a tariff, they just receive back from the government. So they're taking U.S. beans, and they're taking a lot of them. Nobody pays attention, and it's an unorthodox way. We're just not used to this, seeing this, but this is how they're grabbing grain or soybeans from the U.S. And again, it goes back to when it's all said and done, we're going to see a great grain robbery.
So explain to me, just clarify for me, Sue, is it private government agencies that are buying soybeans? Why don't they have to report them in the export sales?
Because they're actually, they buy them on the futures contract, and then when they hold, and the ones who are putting the beans out or delivering them, they just catch the delivery because they have the oldest delivery date or the oldest trade date on the books of longs. And so they just keep buying, and you know, we haven't seen. We'll see. I didn't get a chance to see if they did this in January, but they did it in March, and so far they've been doing it in May. So they are grabbing beans and taking them. There's a demand for beans. Now also they're getting less beans out of Brazil than they did a year ago at this time. And the basis has jumped a lot. FOB basis is up, I think it's almost like $2 a bushel. Don't hold me to that, but I think it's close as to what they're garnering more. Mainly because they're, you know, past their harvest in Brazil, and they're shipping mostly over to China, and so that's helped raise the price or the basis to get the farmers to let them go.
Okay, interesting. So let's kind of continue with this idea of, you know, Chinese trade assistance packages, etc. We've got a question here from Dave from Twitter. He said, is weather going to trump any MFP payment scenario?
I think that, yeah, I think it could. The MFP payments, notice that the first one comes out, I believe, in August,
July
or late
August,
July,
yeah.
August. And then the next two is November and early January, if the conditions warrant it. And therein lies because if the market rallies off of weather, then all of a sudden prices are up, you won't need it. But here's the thing on the tariff. I think the tariff, and this is just my opinion, I think the tariff's going to get settled and signed in August.
The tariff or the trade war?
Well, the trade war
Okay.
tariff situation. And the reason I think that was, recall at the end of March, early April, everybody thought we were going to have a deal by the end of March, and of course China never does anything fast. And you've got two superpowers pushing and shoving back and forth. And one's as strong as the other, but China's going to give because they need everything. But in the meantime, they're going to work it until they know they can get their boats loaded so cheaply that, and there's about no more blood to be had, then they'll go ahead and turn the corner. So they're watching this weather market. But at the end of March, early April, they talked about on the South China Morning Post that the agreements, the trade agreements would be made, or the trade agreements would be negotiated and come to an end probably sometime in late June. I thought that was interesting because in late June, now you have there's that focus, and all of a sudden, you know, oh, well, it was kind of poo-pooed and everything was looking like a love relationship and all that, only to have China just back out and say, nope, we're backing out on 150 pages of these agreements that we did agree to. And they knew full well that that would drop the market hard, and then they could come in and buy it. Okay, but then you have, as of July 1, the warehouses in China having to be African swine fever free, and so they've been dumping pork. That's another reason our price has been dropping. And so they've been dumping pork, trying to get it into the channels and get rid of it.
Into their domestic market?
Right,
Okay.
into their domestic market, because when they get into that 1st of July and they get tested, anything that's in the warehouse, well, the whole thing gets cleaned out and destroyed. And they don't want to lose that product.
Oh, so even if some pork isn't infected, but they find infected
the whole
pork,
thing
the whole
gets cleaned
thing.
out. And then July 1st, they have 10,000 slaughterhouses. It's mandatory as of July 1st that they will have to, at that time, test every slaughterhouse, mandatory testing every day for African swine fever. And so it seems strange that all of a sudden, you know, the China Morning Post, South China Post, was talking about the end of June. Here's 1st of July, slaughterhouses, and what have you. Now, here's the other thing. China ships an awful lot of products for our Christmas season, especially starting in about August. My take is that you get an agreement by the end of June, maybe the first few days or whatever of July. Then you have President Xi and President Trump. It takes another month for them the two to get together to sign the deal. Takes you into August, and they'll be able to get all of their products sent over to the U.S. for Christmas season.
And they need the pork, it sounds like.
And they need the pork.
Interesting. Is that Sue's conspiracy theory?
Oh, gosh, yes.
Okay, Sue. Well, we did get one kind of political question in. I'm going to let you answer it how you feel. We've got Donna in Meeker, Colorado. She said, why should others who are barely making it have to bail out farmers who voted for what they are getting?
Well, first off, I have to admit it, and anybody who gets my service knows that I am a Trump fan. I believe that he's holding the Chinese to taking them to task. They needed to be taken to task long before. It's been painful, and I think because the farmer has bitten the bullet here and taken the heat, even though they voted to put him in office, they helped. They weren't the sole ones, but they helped. I think, yes, they have suffered, and he's trying through the USDA, through various programs, to help them out, to cushion them, because bottom line is the farmer is the ones who feeds our country.
Right.
And they also help feed the world. The U.S. is the largest exporter of corn, for example. And we're a major, well, we vie for that #1 spot now with Brazil on beans, but we're major exporters of food. And so it's important to always take care of your farmers. And in the meantime, I think that it's a good thing that he's holding them to task, because finally someone who understands trade is standing up to them and not letting them, when companies come over in China to make things or whatever and they steal the technology, it's just not right. And you can't, it's not right to become a big superpower by stealing everyone else's secrets. And so I think it's a good thing that he is standing up to them. And of course, soybeans, the American farmer, is a major exporter of beans to China. But I think China, in general, needs a lot of commodities. And I think, and I've said it before, when it's all said and done, there's going to be a huge grain robbery out of the U.S.
Well, I'm sure farmers will look forward to that. Sue Martin, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Join us again next week when we'll explore changes to the 35-year-old Conservation Reserve Program, and Dan Huber will join us at the Market to Market table. Until then, thanks for watching, listening, or reading. I'm Delaney Howell. Have a great week.